You're listening to Being Built. I'm your host, Aaron Davis. I'm here with Eric Snell. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we were talking about family and such. Both have big blended families. That's fun.
Yeah,
It creates some
it's a good
lot
time.
of variables to deal with during the holidays, right?
A little bit, yeah. And we end up with like this time we had 12 or 13 people in the house all at once.
Did you?
Figuring out how to get people to sleep, where they sleep and all that stuff.
We had a similar experience here. I think we had 20-some people. I think we had 20 people that actually stayed here in the house.
Oh, wow.
And then like 45-ish for Thanksgiving dinner. So that was Thanksgiving. And then Christmas was chill.
Wow. Yeah.
Just a handful of us. Well, anyway, welcome to we were talking about doing this podcast way back in Thanksgiving time frame or whatever. And we finally got together. So you run a team of software developers. I think when I first met you, it was database administrators, if I recall. So you've kind of been all over software.
So I currently support 4 teams of developers. So there's about 30 people involved. With both full-time teammates that work for Midmark, and then the rest are consultants. So there's a blend there. It's about 50-50 at the moment. I'm trying to remember when we met back in forever ago.
It was I think you were running stuff at CareSource.
It was definitely CareSource. Right. So from a system administrator. So I've been in IT for about 30 years.
Wow.
Crazy.
You must be older than you look. You're telling me the age of your children, and I was in somewhat disbelief. But now that you tell me you've been working in tech for 30 years,
I did the math. I'm going to say I'm over 50. So
yeah, you look younger.
So there's been a lot of that. So
tell me a little bit of this. You got a couple dozen people that you're leading. What are you guys building?
So I'll reflect on that for a second. It's not leading so much, it's enabling. So that's one of the big things about where I'm at today is, and that one is passionate about and truly enjoy, right, is enabling the teams to be successful and then turning them loose so that they have the ownership, they have the accountability. And I'll talk about that, when we get to a little bit. But that's been really, really fun at Midmark because I've been able to build that. I started from zero. Literally, when I walked in the door 3.5 years ago, there was nobody on the team, and we've built that since. So the teams, they're building the cloud-based infrastructure that is supporting connected products. So Midmark is building working to build some more intelligence into their solutions, and figuring out how do we leverage the data to improve our products.
Interesting.
And my teams have built and are building the connection capability, the authentication, the authorization, the registration, the mobile application that lets the devices connect, then also building the user interfaces that start to enable the customer to get insights and information about their products, as well as, like your normal, anybody that gets anything today, right, that's a smart product, you expect to be able to update it over the air and those types of things.
True.
Well, we're having to build that capability for the Midmark products because it doesn't exist yet today.
Yeah, so let's back up to Midmark a little bit and help me understand a little bit more about Midmark. Because I think Midmark, I just think like hospital beds or something. I oversimplify it, right?
Right.
So what's Midmark do? Maybe just kind of high level stuff.
All right.
Right?
So
to get to the point where I can understand a little bit about what you guys are building.
All right. So Midmark started out as over 100 years ago, and they have pivoted multiple times and gotten into the medical space. And I'm probably going to get the date wrong. So anybody watching this from Midmark, forgive me. It was 50s, 60s where they started to get into medical products. I think they are in the medical, dental, and animal health space.
Interesting.
So we produce products for all of those different, what we call business units or types of organizations. So the reflection is one person described it as, if it's bigger than a hammer, we manufacture it and be able to create the environment for those types of companies and services.
Yeah.
So we can outfit entire office, from the things, the carpet, the chairs, the desk, the cabinets,
you have a tremendous suite of products,
the tables, the cabinet. I mean, everything that go into that. So
wow. Okay. And a lot of that Midmark manufactures, or all of it?
A lot of it.
Okay.
So there's some third-party stuff, but we manufacture almost all of it.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, so I wouldn't have thought Midmark produced that vast a menu of products.
Yeah, we touch 10 million lives a day.
Wow, with your various products.
With the product, people interact. 10 million people interact with our products every day.
That's wild.
I think it's every day.
Okay. How big is Midmark?
About 1,900 people worldwide.
Yeah. Okay.
So we have offices across the country. We also have some manufacturing in India and Italy.
Okay, cool.
As well.
Yeah, so the rugs obviously aren't smart rugs, right? So we can narrow the focus a little bit. That gives me some perspective, though. But
they're not smart yet,
right? They might be, right? Forget the scale. You walked in the room, right?
Exactly.
One day. Regarding the products that your team is working on connecting and making smart, part of the inventory of products that Midmark produces. So, what kind of stuff are you guys connecting?
So at the moment, the first two products that the teams are working on, and when I say teams, I don't just mean mine, but across engineering, right, as well, are it's the air compressor and the vacuum pump that go into dental offices.
Okay.
Right. So that's the heart of the dental office. Without that, the dental office cannot function.
Interesting.
That's the thing that pushes air and pulls things, right?
Yeah.
Pushes things.
I spent a lot of time in the dentist, unfortunately.
Right? So without that in the background, the dental office is non-functional. So super critical.
Yeah, that's the engine. Right. That thing's always going. Right?
Connecting that. And then the other part, which is one of Midmark's claim to fame, is the sterilizers. So we produce, I'm going to say, countertop sterilizer size that sit on, counters in offices for all of those different areas. So medical, dental, and animal health, right? All of the equipment or utensils and those types of things have to be sterilized after every procedure.
Okay.
Right. So that is one of the things that we're working on connecting as well.
Okay.
And then there's several other products in those spaces that are coming next, right? So this is the very, very tip of what we're doing in the beginning of it, and then it's just going to expand from there.
So let me ask the kind of the novice question, I guess. Why would I want those items to be connected? Why would I want those items pushing information back and forth?
Right. So the beginning is, I'm going to say, the beginning of any IoT journey from somebody that's a manufacturer, which is about improving the serviceability and quality of your product.
Okay.
Being able to make sure, I can maintain it better. I can provide you better support, better service. Intelligent triage was a term that I just actually heard used today, which I thought was really on point, especially for what we're trying to do, which is when something happens, can whoever is going to service that product take what they need in order to solve it and fix it the first time?
Sure.
As opposed to, an example is, I had somebody come service my dishwasher, and I think it took
3 visits. It just happened to me
5 times. I don't know. It was a long time. It was several times.
Yeah. It just happened to me. So those 25, 45 people we had for Thanksgiving, we ran that dishwasher a lot, and it leaked and it broke, and then 3 visits later. So yeah, that's really interesting.
So that's the idea, right? Is improving that and reducing that, because in the environments we're dealing with, if something is down and broken,
that's a whole business operation.
That's revenue, that's dollars, right? So that becomes important. Long term, right? There's the ability for us to improve our products just as a company, right? Because we can start to see, these are the patterns. This is what's happening. This is the event. So now we can improve our products. And then long term, our mission is, so Midmark's mission is improving the point of interaction between patient and caregiver.
Okay.
Right. So the more information we can start to collect about what's happening in an organization, now we can start to provide the data insights back to that organization that says, here's some options for optimizing your workflows and improving the use, but also reducing the need to pay attention to those core important products, right, manually, right? And we're just going to tell you now's the time to do it, right? And long term, there's always the design or intention that or thought that the product is just reaching out and saying, hey, I need help, I need service. It happens, and then somebody shows up, fixes it, and goes on, and then there's minimal interruption to the data flow. So
so it's not that different than a vehicle. Modern vehicles obviously tell you when to service, and they share some diagnostic information and collect performance. Data.
Exactly.
So it's not that different. It's just in a medical context where that business operation and the good care of the patients obviously is impacted. So it's a kind of a high impact version of that. That's cool. So that gives me a little clarity about what Midmark is working to accomplish. So your team then is working on how data enabling the push and the pull of data and prioritize. Like, where do you start? It just seems like there could be so many things.
So that's an interesting question because I have, like I said, there's 4 teams that I support, and one is responsible for connectivity. In other words, getting the device connected and getting the data once it's thrown out from the device, right? Catching that and getting it into the cloud.
Okay.
And then we have another team that's responsible for the framework of some of the applications that show customers information.
Okay.
And we have a team that is responsible for taking that data as it comes in and having the rules and thresholds and analytics that go against it that says there's a problem, there's not a problem, it's above a threshold, below a threshold, right? And then part of what you just said was, kind of where do you start, right? There's a whole machine learning and analytics team that is starting to look at now what do we learn from that information and go forward.
I see. So the data itself is kind of telling you where you, or it's lending to where you should start questioning.
In some cases, yeah. And then you also have all the subject matter experts from the engineering teams and the product teams because they know how their product works. They know what breaks, what doesn't break. They know what are their most costly service events and those types of things. So you use that information as well. So you have all that legacy information and data that tells you, all right, well, this is the thing that costs us the most on an annual basis or impacts the customer the most on a regular basis. So then you can stop and say, okay, how do we solve that? How do we prevent it? How do we become aware of it? So that's how to begin where we are in the program, in the journey.
Yeah. So I guess if your builders, your engineers, they have an understanding of how those products are used and where the vulnerable spots are and what the regular maintenance calls are and what they're probably on the front end too of what the customers are saying they wish was part of that product, right? So I'm sure there's overlap in that kind of backlog of new features or whatever with connectivity, right?
Correct. Yeah, because you have product managers that are responsible for each of the business units, right? So they're focused on what are their customer needs, what are they trying to deliver, and then they're taking that, feeding that into the product itself, and then that is being tied into what is the intelligence that we need to add in to enhance that.
Yeah. So I wonder what % of your, I don't even, I would be impressed if you knew this or could even
Probably
guess.
Don't.
Right. But I'm thinking about the vast amount of like products you referred to. So when I think about a doctor's office or clinic of some sort, and just all the different things that are there, anything bigger than a hammer, you say? Right. There's a bunch of stuff. So I wonder what percentage of those things are in scope or are in your sites to create some connectivity for those devices.
I don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
So I'm going to set that one aside.
Yeah, and if you said it out loud, then
I'm speculating on behalf of someone else that's actually responsible for that decision.
Right. It's fun to go down that path though and think about how much different everything could be if it was as magical and science fiction as it can be, right?
Correct.
Like everything's just kind of limited by how much you invest in it.
Correct. And I can speculate all day long, but it really comes down to what is the value that's useful to your customers, right? Not just the magic, right? And the pretty stuff, right? But what's actually useful to improving that thing right? And finding those points is what's really important. So that's the focus.
What the customer's going to pay for ultimately.
Exactly. Ultimately.
I'll tell you what I will pay for all day long, every single day, is not having to fill out the same forms multiple times. So there are things that, I've experienced going to a medical setting where I'm like, absolutely, I don't mind if the bill's a little bit more for that, right?
Yes. And unfortunately, we do not own that aspect.
No, right. I know.
Right.
But the same is true in the product space, right?
Yeah.
I told you I've sat in a dentist chair more than I'd like to admit, but more than I would have liked to have spent. But a more comfortable, quicker, more effective experience is worth it, right? Mm-hmm. If I could have spent half as much time and have had twice as much results because the equipment is improved, my children's lives will be better than mine because of that, right? So 4 different teams that you support. So tell me a little bit about that. I referred to leadership, and I know you as a leader because I know you've always kind of been responsible for big scope things, but I've also always known you as a humble person, and I think you're very mindful of the experience of the doer and the person who's responsible for the big cool stuff, right? So I hear that in your tone a little bit.
Yeah, so this is going to give a little history. Is in the past, right? As someone that has been fortunate enough to be put into positions of some type of management or whatever, right? Is I have made, in hindsight, the mistake of being some type of technical pillar in the organization, right? In other words, when the team's working on stuff, right, I'm asking questions, but I'm also then driving, okay, I have to understand the tech enough to be able to make the decision on some of the big things, or really, force that. And that's what I used to do.
Okay.
Right. In the environment I'm in, when I say I support the teams, right, we're using Scrum and, applying Agile principles. Okay. And, we have solid product owners that are, focused on, this is what they're delivering, this is the backlog, and those types of things, where I've been able to say I'm responsible for ensuring that we have a sustainable, secure, maintainable solution or set of solutions, right? So really saying, what are those non-functional requirements that must be in place, right, from a performance standpoint, or those types of things, and communicating that to the team and saying, this is what we need to do. This is your responsibility. You need to do that because you own the product. You build the product, you release the product, and you have to support the product when it's in production, right? So we have a true DevOps mentality that says you own it, soup to nuts. Mm-hmm. And then turning that over, and they make the technical decisions. They make the decisions on, this is how it gets implemented in the cloud. And at the end of the day, I don't have to be in the room ever for them to get done what they need to do, right? They own it. My thing is, asking the questions to say, okay, did you automate that? Right? Because one of the things we did start with at the very beginning was automate everything. Okay. Right? So automate releases, automate testing, automate your infrastructure with infrastructure as code. All of those things, it was really cool as kind of a greenfield when we walked in. We were able to do that at the very beginning. Nice. And it has paid off immensely. Yeah. In fact,
did you have to stave off some, where's my whatever demands, like at the beginning, as you're setting all that up?
Actually, we didn't in what we were doing, because Midmark was investing in kind of this incubator, okay, right, on, okay, how do we do this? How do we build connected products and all those types of things? So we were able to build it from scratch and kind of grow. And we didn't have that, like, hey, where's our stuff? Because you didn't do that. And I can tell you, I did make, a mistake I made in part of it was when we spun up one of the teams that was responsible for the telemetry aspect of it, was we focused on getting the pretty and the UI stuff out first. And I said, oh, we can hold off on automating the infrastructure. Huge mistake. We'll never make that mistake again. right? But the back to the teams is they have given the instruction of this is what you must achieve and you're responsible for your product, and I don't take on the making those decisions for them. I just ask the questions to say, did you make the right choices, right? And then at the end of the day, they run with it, they own it, they have that sense of accountability. So I have some really fantastic teams that just drive, and they think ahead. They're like, well, we need to do this. We need to have this dashboard. We need to be looking at these metrics. We need to understand, how do we, prevent this from happening? Because I'm like, if I've told them, I'm like, okay, if you want to get called at 2 a.m, that's up to you.
Right.
You can choose to do that. But if you'd like to automate it and figure out how to fix it and self-heal, I'd recommend that.
Yeah, it's funny how sometimes in leadership, all you're bringing to the table is having done something before, so a roadblock or a pitfall, right?
Right.
The 2:30 call is something you experience, so you're like, oh, I don't ever want to experience that again, and then you share that caution.
Yeah, I've been where I want to throw, and this is going to date me, my pager across the room, right? Because it won't stop vibrating.
Yeah. So how to not ever get there again, right?
Right.
Releases on Friday night and that kind of thing.
Yeah, we did. This is driving and keeping that mentality of we should be able to release all the time, right? That's that automation of testing and making sure and having those measures and metrics in place to say, okay, are we testing our code? Do we have unit tests in place? Do we have end-to-end tests in place? And those types of things, so that when it goes out, we know it works and they can stop it before it goes.
Yeah.
If it's a problem. It's been really good.
You referred to, setting yourself up as a pillar. And I took that to mean as, kind of there's a dependency on your technical expertise, right? And that having been a mistake earlier in your career.
Definitely.
So should you have known better? Was that a matter of maturity? Was that just how the industry was? How did you when did you and how did you realize that was a mistake and kind of evolve out of that habit?
I think it was maturity on my part on not knowing and not recognizing it. I would say, because there wasn't anything preventing me from doing it the other way, right? It was just a recognition of this is how it could work. And I think actually the application of Agile principles enabled me to see that.
Okay.
Right. Because without that, I didn't have that thought of team ownership. I didn't have that thought of, okay, you're responsible for creation, release, and once it's out there, regardless of whether it was infrastructure or software. Yeah. And so it never clicked. And then about 2012, 2013, is when I first was kind of introduced to the concept of here's how you do Agile and Scrum. And that just hit me in the face. And I was like, I want to do it that way.
Right. Self-led teams, essentially, right? Peer-led teams.
And it still, I was super immature in the aspect at that time, right? So it's taken this long to be the point where it's like, oh, this is how it works. This feels right. This is really working. And then coming into the Midmark environment 3.5 years ago, was they had the intention of we want to build these types of teams. And so starting from scratch, having the support from management on this is what we want to do, it was just really freeing to be able to say, all right, this is what it works and this is what it feels like. Yeah. And then, it was actually at Midmark. So, I've only been there 3.5 years. I've been doing this for 30. So it took me 27 years to get to that point.
Yeah.
It was really good. It hit me. It was like, do not take that on. I have to tell myself, do not take that on. Yeah. I just did it this morning, because there was something that came up and I'm like, go tell your teams what needs to be done. They will do it. They will drive it. You do not do it because you will actually fail because you're the bottleneck.
True.
So it's been really good.
there's something to be said for the size of a team and the diversity of talents that you assemble on a team that lends to your ability to then say no to making yourself, a critical checkbox in that process. Right. Yep. It's funny now running my independent practice. I've got a couple of recruiters and some marketing people and very, very small team. So I have to say yes some, right? And so I've got that habit because I've spent the last better, 15 or so years as a leader. I've got the habit of like, oh, I'll give that to well, there's nobody to give it to now. I kind of miss that a little bit. But I think that's a great habit as a leader, is to make sure you don't set yourself up in a way that people are waiting on you.
Great.
Like, oh, just as soon as Eric approves that,
then we can do it.
As soon as Eric reviews that,
was terrible.
We'll move forward. Yeah,
terrible pattern.
That's a real bad trap to put your whole team in. They're losing productivity. You're probably not as good at it as other people.
Exactly. They're so much smarter than you. Just let them do it.
Yeah, that's a great learning. It's funny how, as you were talking, I was reflecting on my own maturity that I learned through business principles. For you, Agile, Scrum lent to, it humbles you a little bit, an Agile and a Scrum environment where it really says like the engineers are the smart guys in the room. Let them drive, right? Give them the tools and the resources that they need.
And you have to protect them and support them throughout that, because
they're going to get interrupted.
They're going to get interrupted. Well, they're going to get you're going to have other management, right? That doesn't necessarily always align to that.
Yeah. Yeah, so. Exactly. That's cool though, that Agile and Scrum kind of, it adds a deference in your attitude of leadership. And I think that's good in general as a leader. It's not just good for building software. It's good for leading a family. It's good for leading a sales team, having some deference to the expert in a given function. So anyway, that's got me thinking deep thoughts over here.
Think your deep thoughts. And then come up to the next question.
I know a few of your team, actually. I was thinking about your team too. And you do have some really smart guys on your team.
I have some really talented people.
Yeah. So what's the trick? I mean, how do you keep the good ones?
I wish I could offer an answer that is perfect. It's about challenging them and continuing to, open the intellectual doors that they can go through, right? To create those opportunities, or actually, sorry, it's not create the opportunities. It's more about understanding what they want to achieve in a career. So that goes back to the support aspect of it, right? Is supporting those teams. So as a manager, and this has been, again, in the position I'm in, it's been really cool, is I get to have the conversation with people that is, what do you want to do in your career? What do you want to achieve this year? And how do I support you? And I'm to be honest, I've never done that before. Not that mentality.
Okay.
Right. It's
never
kind
before
of
now, or what?
Never before now. Not with that same approach. Not of a, hey, how do I help you succeed? Right. And it's just been a game changer. Yeah. So doing that I think that is rewarding from a culture standpoint for the people that are involved. And then creating these environments where people have ownership and you're enabling them to branch out and speak up and say, hey, you have an idea. I just had a gentleman today that asked me, well, when should I put this out to the product owner? And I'm like, now, just do it. That you guys as the team, you own the product. So if you have a recommendation of something that should be done, please do it. Right. You guys have that ability, and you need to have that trust that your team is going to receive that and go, all right, let's talk it through. Let's figure it out. Let's prioritize it. You're going to work with your product owner and say, okay, this is when it's important.
Yeah. So you just take that hierarchical thinking, take it away. Just pop that bubble. It's gone. Right?
It is always there. You constantly have to go back and pop that bubble all the time. I mean, you're constantly doing it, because it's like people get in that mindset of like, oh, well, you're the boss. And it's like, no. I mean, yes, I support you, and there's this, some of the other management stuff that comes along with it, but you gotta constantly go in and do that. And doing that, I think, then sets people up to want to stay, because they're like, this is healthy, this is cool, this is challenging. But it's always a struggle, right? Especially in the market today. It's, there's always that thing where somebody's going to back up a truckload of money to somebody's door and go, hey, we want to pay you X to come here, and you can't fight that.
You work with a lot of high demand folks, right? I mean, they've always got options, and being a great option and getting important business objectives accomplished is sometimes a challenge, right? The dirty work has to be done. The unfun stuff still has to be done.
Correct.
And not all of it is bleeding edge, greenfield.
It's not all pretty.
Sophisticated problem solving. Some of it's just like, oh, this broke, maintenance, whatever, right?
Right.
So yeah, it is fun though when you let smart people do it the smartest way. I think that's a good observation, is when you kind of get the dumb out of the way, right? Mm-hmm. And let them do it the smart way.
And usually the dumb is the manager in the position, right? Sure. You just get out of the way, dude.
Allowing the smartest people in the room to make the decisions that are the most impactful, right? Mm-hmm. That's what it comes down to. I've struggled with that a lot because, I'm a typical, salesperson turn leader. I talk a lot, mm-hmm. and you miss moments when you do that, right?
Definitely do.
I sent a message to an old colleague the other day as I was driving to a meeting with somebody. And this is a guy I hadn't spoken to in a long time. And I was really curious to learn things about him. And so I was cautioning myself, like, don't talk too much. Listen. Mm-hmm. And I sent him a message and I said, thank you for getting in my head however many years ago. You're still teaching me how to listen. Right. But that really is kind of the job of the leader, particularly when you support teams of really smart people. The worst thing you could be doing is taking up airtime, setting obstacles in the way. And the best thing you could be doing is facilitating, enabling better communication between them and between their other business partners.
I agree.
And getting obstacles and administrative distractions and all that kind of stuff out of the way, and just let the smart people have their way, right? So I think I've accidentally found myself in positions of influence. And usually when I do it, I'll take the role almost apologetically, like, well, you guys know this better than me, so why am I in charge, right?
Right.
And maybe it's just that deference that makes it work.
Well, and I've found, and this is actually, so I got an MBA just a couple years ago.
Oh, nice.
And one of the classes was actually my very last class. One, it was very impactful, was you can actually phrase everything as a question. So doing that deference or doing that enablement and facilitation is just continually ask questions and don't make statements as a leader, unless you're being very, very intentional about it. And that's mm-hmm. One of the things I've found with my team, and is that I've told them, and I don't always get it right, but I've told them, I said, I will tell you when I'm being directive. Like, I know this has to happen this way, you know, so let's go do this, right? Because this is where we have to go. Mm-hmm. Versus, okay, I'm going to ask some questions and then you guys get to make a decision and you guys get to ask the conversation. But trying to stay in that question mode 90% of the time helps me not sit there and, like you said, take up airtime.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to talk.
Being accidentally directive is real too.
Very.
I've suffered from that a number of times where I thought I was brainstorming. I thought I was trying to jog thoughts a little bit and to get the leaders to make their own call, right? And instead they're like, well, you said da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, I don't want you quoting me. I was just trying to get you thinking, right?
Yeah.
I didn't presume to have the answer, and they thought I had the answer because I spoke.
Yeah.
So it's scary sometimes as a leader. You kind of learn to realize how much people are listening. As a salesperson, that was early in my career. You get to walk into a room and blah, 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 and people edit and filter or whatever else. But as a leader, you walk into the room and do the same thing, and you've sent 10 people 10 different directions.
Yeah, you have to declare your intent. And I've actually, even the people that are my leaders on teams, like whether they're designated leaders or, just by default because they're capable, mm-hmm. right? I've coached them on that. I'm like, declare what you're doing at the beginning, because it helps other people, because you're influential, right? You're influential, and you say something and people are going to take it and run with it. So declare whether you're like, okay, I'm being directive. I'm saying, look, we have to do this. We have to do it this way. And here's why. Or I want to have a conversation. I want to discuss this. I want to go back and forth. And if you can declare that at the beginning, that helps people. It doesn't always work, but it does help, because if you, like, to your point, if you don't recognize it and you think you are, as a leader, you're not. You're you're like putting things in cement.
Yeah, that's great advice. Declare your intent. So when you say, I'm brainstorming, I'm going to give 2 ideas, maybe you've got another 6, I'll let you pick the best ones. That's very different than, here's a couple of things we could do.
Right.
So being very specific about how you imagine the conversation going puts you in a better position for it to likely go that way.
Correct.
That's great advice. I like that. Why didn't you tell me that like 10 years ago?
Because I didn't know it.
Yeah, right. You live and you learn. Isn't it a shame that it takes decades to figure out how to be?
At some point, being older, and being a little wiser is useful.
A few things add up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just chatting with somebody on social media today about software people and their relationship to the business. And the comment that I made was, they are the business.
Well, and that is one thing that I have always struggled with, right? Is, IT or software, right? And then they say the business or whatever.
Who is this, the business?
It's like, wait a minute, we are all on the same ship, going the same direction, trying to achieve the same business outcomes.
Right.
And that's actually a leap that we're working on this year. Is thinking about what is the business outcome we want to achieve. And I don't mean just like make lives better, but as measured by,
revenue, customer satisfaction,
exactly,
right?
And bringing that to the teams that are doing software development and thinking about it that way, I think is going to be very, very impactful. And that's something as what we're doing within the IT organization and software development, we're trying to do this year and really focus on. So I think it's going to be useful.
What do you think about the idea of like a pre-test and a post-test, right? So I've always imagined that large organizations spend far too little time educating their, I say large organizations because you operate in more silos, right? You have more little niche areas of functionality that's supporting the business. But it's far too little time helping the whole team, the whole organization understand exactly how the business works. What's the customer like? Why do they buy? How does the business make money? How does the business spend money? Just that mini MBA, right? Not the 2 years or whatever,
right?
But just that mini MBA, basic business stuff. Because everybody who writes a piece of software or who does accounting or who manages HR or cleans the carpet or whatever is capable of understanding that if I've got a candy bar business, I buy candy bars and I sell them for more, right? And most businesses are not that sophisticated. I mean, there are very few businesses that have, 14 critical stakeholders or it all falls apart. Most of us are operating in businesses that have a handful of critical variables. So understanding at a high level the high impact aspects of the business model at every desk in the organization, right? Is not that ambitious. And so I wonder if, like, you were to ask somebody, like, how do we make money, right?
I think it would be, it's tough, and you have to be intentional about it. And, taking the approach that every single employee is a salesperson for your organization is a mentality that you have to get to. I have to work at doing that and communicating to my teams better to teach them and show them or demonstrate what those things are. I think that's a good call out. I don't think it's something I personally do well.
It's a long-term payoff.
But it's definitely a long-term payoff. And I have interacted and work with people. There's a few people that do that naturally, that like ask those questions like, well, how is this profitable? Or
those are the guys who are doing consulting on the side.
Maybe
savvy business minds,
they should be, right? But then but the other people don't, because it just doesn't. They're doing their job and they're doing it well, but it doesn't come out. But I think that's a good point. Is if we can do that, that raises the bar across the entire organization, and people focus on what's really necessary.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, within Scrum and within software development, you challenge your team to work with, when the product owner says, well, we should do this, right? Part of the rest of the team's responsibility is to say, why,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Should we, right? Is that really what you're trying to achieve, and ask those questions?
Yeah.
But if you can, and then if you can expand that to your point of, okay, well, as a company, we want to achieve this particular profit or deliver this particular thing, then the team starts to ask those same questions with a different lens, which I think would be really powerful.
Yeah, what's the implications on our personnel and cultural objectives?
Right.
And what's the implications on our financial constraints or whatever? Just people understanding. Not everybody needs to be the CEO, but everybody could be a little bit more attuned to the highest level objectives of every large chunk of the business.
I think you got to make it available. I think that's one thing. Like in my role,
investment.
I think I need to make that information available to people, and that I know I can improve in doing that.
Yeah, every leader probably could. I mean, it's not if it doesn't have a deadline or a big impact mandate associated to it, it's really hard to commit intentionally to that. But it is kind of one of those long-term impact kind of things. I was just thinking about that as I got into that conversation about, software is the business. What are you talking? Who's this the business?
Right. We are.
But yeah, we absolutely are. I've run into that in HR, right? It's like HR wants to talk about the business or whatever. Like, if you're not the business, what are you doing here? Right? But everybody can get, I think, trapped in their silo at times. Mm-hmm. There's something to be said for, I've gone back and forth between big companies and small. Both moves are refreshing when you've spent a lot of time in the other, right?
Agreed.
So when you spend a lot of time in the small business, going to a big business who does things right, or, essentially they have more resources, right? Mm-hmm. There's more depth in every given capability.
They can spend more time and money on the overhead to affect those processes.
Right. And I've been the COO who's taking out the trash. And I'm like, why is there do we not have a cleaning service or something? Right. So you have that refreshing depth in a bigger company, and then you go to a big company, like, can we just make decisions and get things done?
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of refreshing then to go back to a small organization. But what I find in that going back and forth is that, when you get into the bigger organization and you've seen more of the kind of inner workings in a smaller context, the big behemoth makes more sense, right? Because you kind of understand why a little bit, or you're at least able to ask that, like,
you understand the why, right? Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. Midmark, your customer ultimately is that pet or that person or that, those teeth, right? Who are getting care, and really impact. Midmark's goal or mission objective is to improve the experience between the care provider and the person being cared for. That's ambitious. That's big. Do you feel like, I guess I'm kind of getting into like culture things or whatever, but do you feel like your team identifies with that in some way? I know a lot of folks say big mission kind of stuff, and it's just kind of vague and out there, and don't really connect to it.
Yep.
How close does your team operate to that ideal?
I think we should ask my team that question.
I guess so, yeah.
Because that would be a good indicator. Again, that's one of the challenges that I have, things that I have challenged myself to do better, is continually iterate and talk about what that mission is to the team. Mm-hmm. So my boss, the VP of IT, Sean Ashcraft, he does a really good job of every meeting. He starts with, this is the company mission.
Oh, okay, nice.
Why do we do this? What is the outcomes we want to achieve? Yeah. And it's like repetition, it's kind of like the billboard, right? Yeah. Repeat, and people start to see that and connect to it and relate to it. And that's not something I've done really well with my teams.
Yeah.
Right. I've talked about it, haven't put it in their face. So one of my goals for 2023, if you want to call it a resolution, is take that pattern and use that pattern in front of my teams. So we're presenting that message first.
Yeah.
I had an all team meeting today, and as I started it, I realized I didn't have that slide, and I was like, dang it.
Yeah.
I need to start with that slide every time, because it's important. It's an important reminder, right, on what that is. So I would say if you ask me, like how well does my team, I would say 50-50.
Mm-hmm.
If you went across the board, so I'd like to raise that number.
That's a needs improvement score.
Definitely. I definitely have that as a needs improvement.
That's good that you've got it sounds like Sean is a good leader in that respect, at least, because you have, I don't know him, but, repetition is one of those things that's hard to create a habit around that, but it is really important as a leader to repeat yourself.
Yep.
When something's important, to stay on message. It's not different than creating a brand or whatever else. When it comes to leading a team, you're creating brand in many respects. So
Agreed.
Staying on message is important. And sometimes that means you just have to repeat it. It's monotonous sometimes, and you forget as a leader. Did I say it just say it again?
Right. Just say it again.
Case. Yeah.
Right. And if you stop for a second and think about, okay, well, if I was the receiver of that, would I see it as repetition? And the answer is probably not.
Right.
Right. Because when somebody does it and you're like, oh, well, that was useful because I needed that.
If it's familiar, you can always just kind of blow past it. Right.
Right.
If it's new, for somebody, it's going to be new again. Right. But what else? You mentioned resolutions, and that being kind of on your list of things that you want to improve, over the next year plus. Are there other things that you're thinking about that you're ambitious about or hopeful about changing, or recent learnings that you're kind of taking into the way that you
focus? Continue to maintain the fact that the customer is the focus. Always ask, okay, what is the customer value we're delivering? Right? What is the thing that we're achieving that meets a customer need? Are we meeting the customer need? So, and it's not just features, right? It is what is the outcome the business wants, and what is the outcome the customer wants, and do those things come together? Yeah. So that's, if I would say, 2023 and beyond, but that's important to maintain.
That's always great, worthwhile repetition for an engineering team,
right?
Who's enamored with and kind of compelled toward a career in building and fixing things,
and engineering things,
because they like building.
They will engineer the crap out of it.
Yeah, there's a strong bias there for plus this, plus that.
I have been there so many times where I have done that, and you look back and you're like, I didn't focus on the customer. I had fun playing with this thing over here, but I didn't pay attention to what the end result was.
Like, do we really need 4 damn microphones in the room? It's easy to get geeky about a thing, when you learn something new and you're trying to fix something or whatever. It's really easy to kind of overindulge in fixing too many different directions, right?
Yep.
Any last thoughts before we wrap it up? Any last thoughts or closing philosophy or deep anything you want to provoke?
I don't know about any deep thoughts or anything like that. If I was going to touch on something that was, I'm going to say, outside of the work realm, I read a really interesting book called "Orbiting the Giant Hairball" by Gordon McKenzie.
Okay.
And I think it's actually dated a little bit, but it was a really interesting read. So anybody that's listening, it's about, so this gentleman, he worked at Hallmark for decades as a creative person, and it's about maintaining your individuality and your uniqueness, but leveraging the gravity of what the organization is, so that you can orbit and be unique, but still maintain, you're not flying off into space.
Okay.
Right? So, but it's a really creative approach in design. So if I was going to, throw something out there into the world to, hey, take a look at that, I think it's an interesting thing. I actually took it and I bought a book, and all of my team got a book for Christmas.
Really? What's the name of the book again?
It's called Orbiting the Giant Hairball.
Cool. I'll check that out. That reminds me, you and your wife just published a children's book. Is that right?
We did. Yeah. Yes. It's called Bumbleland, all one word. It is available on Etsy, so if anybody's listening.
Nice.
But yeah, it's a bedtime story for, we had said probably 2 to 6-ish, but we have found that
range is a little wider.
It's a little broader than that, because the characters are interesting, and then we created a plushie for one of the characters as well, and that seems to be interesting to people. A pretty broad range, but like even up to 11, from a kid standpoint, and then adults are like, well, I'm just going to keep this because I like it.
Right.
So it's like pillow size, so you can squish on it. But
my kids are grown now, so I won't say which one, but at least one of my grown kids definitely held on to stuffed animals a little bit longer than I would have thought I would have expected. So there's nothing wrong with keeping that childhood, that happy youth for as long as possible, right? That's cool though. Congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks. It was really fun. Actually, we just today sent out because we did a Kickstarter and just sent out the last rewards for that portion of it.
Nice. Okay.
As well. So yeah,
congrats on that. It's fun to stay busy outside of the office as well, and doing cool projects like that is certainly a way to kind of exercise those muscles, right?
Yeah.
Well, congrats. All right, Eric, thank you very much. We'll call it quits on this conversation, but look forward to future ones.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.